I'm one of the Melbourne account managers. Joining me today is going to be Jodie Barnes, the consulting manager, and Phil Taphouse, BDM. So the agenda that we're going to be covering today is covering a few topics. Firstly, myself is going to be covering the SunSystems landscape and the roadmap. Secondly, Jodie Barnes is going to be covering what's new in the SunSystems version 6 pathway and Q&A Evolve. Following that, Phil is going to be covering the Infor 10X collaboration framework and some of the exciting new products such as Mingle, Motion and Ion. Then lastly, we're going to do an online Q&A form where you guys can input your questions and we'll endeavour to answer those online or follow them up offline afterwards. Okay, so we'll get straight into the roadmap, and we'll cover the real message we want to get across today is no matter where you fit in the landscape, if you're on version 4 or 5 of Sun, you're really required now to contemplate and start budgeting for your upgrade planned event. As you can see in yellow, for any customers on version 4, this is a pathway which will predominantly just maintain technical platform compliance in its releases, as all the Infor R&D now is focused on version 6. As you'll see in yellow, the latest platform release, or version 4.4, now allows you to expand up to Windows Server 2012, Windows 8, SQL Server 2012 and 64-bit. For those customers out there on version 5, Infor made the announcement last year that there will be no further development or investment in this version. They've chosen to move to Actuate reporting services to SunSystem reporting services due to its easier use and more accessible reporting environment. Due to this, going forward, after May 31st, no new or additional licenses can be purchased from Infor. PA would like to just mention that we will continue to service version 5 and support the product. However, it's definitely worth looking at your licensing requirements if you need to purchase additional licenses before this date, as the pathway for version 5 is to be phased out, with patch sets being phased out over time for the older versions. As you'll see in blue on the map, for our version 6 customers, this is the gateway for the Infor 10X platform and the suite of exciting new add-on products to be covered by Phil. The current version within this pathway is version 6.1, which Jodie will be covering today, along with the benefits and enhancements within the new version 6.2 release. One thing I'd like to do is bring to the attention of any clients who are currently using Windows XP or Office 2003 in their environment, as Microsoft has announced retiring support from April the 8th, which will expose you to new security risks if you're not already in upgrade planning mode. I'll now hand over to Jodie Barnes, who will cover off what's new in version 6. For those of you that haven't dealt with Jodie Barnes has been with PA for 10 years in the Sun team. She's worked with Sun since 1993, first as a user, then as a consultant. She's also a chartered accountant and was a financial controller when she first started using SunSystems version 3.
Okay, cool. All right, so thanks, Dean. I just wanted to really start talking to you really about what's on offer with Sun 6. I'm going to start with Sun 6.1, which is the current version that we've been using, and then I'll talk about some of the new functionality that's coming in Sun 6.2, and then we'll go and talk about the new version of Q&A, which is about to be released. So Sun 6.1, which is the current version, has been around for roughly about 2 years, maybe slightly longer than that. At its core, its functionality is very similar to Sun 5.4. So for those of you who are on 5.4, you might find that it looks very familiar to you. So one of the new features of Sun 6. Version Sun of 6 of Sun is that it's web deployable. Although some of the administrative functions aren't available over the web, it's also deployable in SharePoint, and that's becoming a platform that's more and more important to our client base. And in some terms, that's called Mingle. And when you talk to, when Phil talks later on, he'll talk to you a bit more about Mingle and explain what that means. So some of the other changes that you can see in Sun 6.2 6.1 I should say, sorry, is that Dean mentioned before, Actuate is no longer available, and they've replaced that with Microsoft reporting services. And what that means is any the reports you have them internally within Sun, so these are not your Q&A reports, but they're your standard Sun reports, such as your journal listings, you might have your checks, purchase orders, things like that. They're no longer, they need to be recreated. They come in what's called Microsoft reporting services. This is a report, it's much more widely used around the world and much easier to work with than Actuate. It has scheduling capabilities, which means you can now schedule reports, and reports can be output to various formats like PDF and Excel. And I know for some people who come from version 4 to version 5, that ability was lost in version 5 with Actuate, and that comes back in. It comes with a library of over 200 sample reports, and we've supplemented that further with some additional reports PA has enhanced. For those of you who use multi-currency, there's some new functionality there. For example, you can copy the 4th currency code from your invoice transaction to your payment lines generated in the payment run. This is controlled by settings in the payment profile, providing choice as to whether they retain the 4th currency analysis or not. One of the things they've done is to address US GAAP, and this was actually part of 5.4, but I thought it's worth pointing out again. You now actually have the choice of paying your supplier invoices using the current rates or historic rates, and that depends on your accounting policy. Revaluation profiles now can have preset criteria. Both of the profiles are set up in advance and then run when you require them. This eliminates the need to remember those settings and makes the processing faster and easier to run. There's additional criteria to allow more precise selection of your revaluation criteria, new flags, overrides and postings on specific currency values, and audit data to help keep track of revaluations. And for those of you who work with revaluations, you know that the number of transactions can actually add up, so this is actually a nice way of actually managing that better. There's been some enhancements to the journal by the introduction of journal class types. And this function I'm also mentioning here is also available in 5.1, but I know it's been a big enhancement for users, so I thought I'd mention it again for those who are on earlier versions. There's a journal reversal and copy function, and this allows your journals to be reversed or copied. It's basically a function to rather than the moment we create transfer disk profiles, or for those on Sun 4, we do a ledger export and a journal import and reverse fields around. In addition, there's new function which is a payment run reversal, and what that allows us to do is reverse payment runs where the check numbers have not been written to the ledger. And in the past, this has actually been a significant problem because the checks couldn't be voided without check numbers. There's enhancements to the fixed assets module through the introduction of asset class types, and what that allows us to do is to set depreciation rates on an asset type. So you might have your fixtures and fittings, and you attach an asset to an asset type, and depreciation is attached through that. There's also partial disposals. There's additional controls over allocation markers. I won't go into the detail, but just suffice to say there's more control over the use of those. This is sort of going for people who, this comment's about for people who haven't been on a version or version before Sun 5.3. At that version, and currently with the newer versions, Infor introduced the idea of a global security framework, and that was in response to Sarbanes-Oxley. And what that does is it moves the control of your security outside the SunSystems database into a separate database. So therefore, you've got controls. You can have people like the IT team managing the security rather than it being as part of the SunSystems database. And for those of you in Sun 4, you might like to know that you can actually have multiple sessions open at one time. Introduces the idea of a single sign-on and Windows authentication. So that's just a quick rundown on 6.1. This screen I'm showing you now is actually the new look of 6.2. So you can see there's a bit of a change in there. One of the things that Infor have done over the last few years is investigate how Sun looks and feels. So we expect these days, you buy your mobile phone, you expect that it's not only functional, but that it looks good and it's easy to understand. So Infor have actually bought a design house based in New York, and they've worked with Google and Amazon and the likes. And the whole purpose of that is across the whole Infor suite is to improve the look and feel, so it's what we call consumer grade. That's the good, they look good and they're easy to understand. There's all improved security with the introduction of Sun 6.2, and there's more interaction with Mingle. I mentioned before that Sun 6.1 introduces the web browser deployment. I just want to show you a screen here of the 6.2 web browser. This isn't the one that's going to be shipped with the first versions of 6.2, but it's in one of the next enhancements, and I'm not sure how clear it comes up on the screen, but there's little boxes around the sections, and really what they're working towards is a navigation type homepage, and that's what that screen's showing you there. There's also web performance enhancements, so it becomes more viable to actually use your Sun systems over the web. If you remember earlier, I mentioned that not all the functions are available over the web for Sun 6.1. There is additional functionality in 6.2, and what this screen is showing is User Manager. So for those of you who aren't on a current version of Sun Systems, User Manager is where we talked about that global security framework where we move the control and the management of security outside the Sun database. That's now available over the web as well. And you can also run your transfer disk profiles for those of you on 6.1. I'm going to talk now a little bit about some of the new features that are coming with Sun Systems. So they're kind of enhancements that are coming along. These are new features. And the first one, for those of you who have environments where you might be multilingual, is that it's now Unicode enabled. And what that means is you can have a single Sun database deployment for multiple languages. And the screen I've got up here shows us a journal entry screen or ledger entry screen in Japanese at the top, French in the middle, and Chinese at the bottom. And they're all coming from the same, they're a bit hidden to be seen, but all from the PK1 database in a single Sun instance. The idea of this will obviously is that it's the way we're moving forward, but also it will result in lower total cost of ownership. You won't have to have separate Sun instances to deal with different languages. It also allows for mixed character sets in a single field. So if you look at that bottom left-hand side of the screen, you can see that there's Japanese, there's English, there's Chinese, and there's Hindi, and that's allowed within a single field. If you're currently using Sun and we upgrade you to Sun 6.2, all your historical transactions will be upgraded to Unicode as well. Not sure if anybody on the call here also has operations in the Middle East and India, but if you do, you might be interested to know that Sun 6.2 has Hindi and Arabic translations, and when Sun detects that it's got a Hindi or Arabic user, it'll flip the screens from right to left, and it also has a, I think I pronounced it correctly, Hijri calendar, which is the Muslim calendar available. One of the other new functions is called Business Unit Administration, and its purpose is to manage your business units and groups, to make that easier. You use it to make copies of business units and to set them up. So basically when you create a new business unit, you can take it offline. Nobody can use it until it's ready to be used. If you want to do administration on your systems, you can take them offline. There's improved backup and restore functionality, and this thing called packing and storing it. And really where that's allows us to do is really take copies of information and move them around. So say you wanted to send data to us for support reasons, that functionality will simplify that process. There's been some improvements to Sun Systems reporting services. Some of the improvements include user-selected output folders. At the moment you can't choose that. In Sun 6.2 you can. You can burst report output to file systems. You can schedule reports, report backup and restore. In 6.1, when you run a report from Sun Systems, you can only run reports that are actually generating from using Sun Systems data. That actually changes when you come to Sun 6.2. You can actually run reports with external data which is run through reporting services, Microsoft reporting services. I think this is one of the most exciting new functions coming with the next version of Sun Systems, and it's extended analysis. This is actually going to be a new module of a new function, and I think it's long overdue. I remember when we went from 5 to 10 analysis codes and thinking that was quite exciting. Well, this actually now allows us to create multi-dimensional databases per analysis code. It works on your ledger analysis codes, and what this diagram is showing us is there's a T code, and you can see it in the green section, transaction analysis code or ledger analysis dimension. Within that, you can then further analyse the data. So in this example, we're using region, division, manager, number of employees, budget, due date. The custom extension fields are user definable. There's 35 on them. There's numeric fields, date fields, there's a 255 character free format field, etc. So what I thought I'd do is just show you some examples, just to give you an idea and a bit of a flavour of what you can do. There's no means limited to this. So the first one's for an oil and gas client. On the project code, we've decided that we need to know what state it's located in, where it is, who's the site manager, what status it is. We've got some numeric fields on the right-hand side of the screen and some date fields, or date field there, and we've got our notes field. Next, I've done a financial services example. So a bit simpler in this case, what we want to analyse by product type. We talk about the type of product, product group, where it belongs, where the market is, and in this case, dividend payment, when it matures, again, the notes field. And just a final example is your not-for-profit. And again, a simpler idea about the funding. We talk about the funder type with another date field, your notes field, etc. So that's really just to give you an idea of what's possible, but so by no means the limitation of what's capable of. One of the other new functions within SunSystems 6.2 is called Enterprise Data Management. And this arose to address the circumstances where you've basically got organisations where they're independently managed, but you want to have synchronised information. For example, you want to copy master data from head office business unit to a subsidiary business unit, including charts of accounts, analysis codes, currency rates, etc. And what this diagram or picture is showing you is you have what we call a publisher business unit, and in this example it's the over in Japan here. It's publishing to what we call a subscriber business unit over here in the Americas. That subscriber business unit in turn becomes a publisher and distributes out to the Americas. And that's what's doing. You can have multiple subscriber and publisher business units. The event to actually do the update is triggered by a business rule, and that's received by the subscriber business units. And what I've got here is a screen showing you what it would look like. So you choose who your publisher business unit, in this case LON, and then who your subscriber business units are, and they're listed there, and then what you want the subscriber business units to receive. This is actually triggered by ION, and I won't go too far into ION because Phil's going to talk about that again shortly, but basically ION's used to create the packages to transfer the data. Now this is evolving technology or functionality, and when we get the first version of 6.2, there's the first 2 tranches of information. I think there's about 18 items that we can actually manage. There's another 4 to come after that through various releases. I'd like to spend some time now just talking about Q&A. Infor over the last little while I've been talking to the industry experts like Gartner and KPMG to see what the market wants and what improvements they're planning on making. When KPMG did the survey, what they found out was 70% of respondents said they're interested in improving the information available to management, and a very similar number have said they're interested in improving their own access to information. And this really supports the idea that we're hearing a lot more about of the finance manager as a business partner rather than a gatekeeper. So Q&A Evolve, and I'll show you some screens of Q&A Evolve in a minute, is the next generation of Q&A which supports these ideas and principles. Excuse me. So just to go take a step back, the purpose of query analysis is to make it easier for managers to analyse their business data and accurately measure performance. You can work where you want and when you want. You can do things faster and more efficiently utilising modern mobile technologies. I talked about the enhanced look and feel, the Soho design Infor, recalling it. That's also been applied across the Q&A modules as well. Now, for those of you who use Q&A now, you'll know that we've got differentiations. We've got Q&A Excel and we've got Q&A Executive. That differentiation and modularisation is disappearing. It's all going to be in Q&A Evolve available through the Excel plugin. What's also different is it's actually moving towards combining Q&A and the BI offering. And the first releases of Q&A Evolve will provide BI dashboards for Q&A using Application Studio. And for those of you who use the Infor BI module, or PM10 you might call it, you may be familiar with Application Studio. It will be available on the latest technologies, finally on 64-bit. I know a lot of people have been waiting for that. Office 2013, it'll be Unicode compliant. Later releases will have SQL 2014, I should say, in-memory database support and Office 365 support. It will also be combined with Office Plus, which is also part of the BI offering in the future to improve customer experience. One of the interesting things I think a lot of people again are waiting for is that this will provide support for cloud deployment. I'll talk a little bit more about cloud deployment in a few minutes. What it's also worth knowing is because it is a change in that we're combining, the Excel plugin, it's the future of Q&A. Q&A Evolve and Q&A 10.1.5 can be run in parallel, or Q&A 10 I should say, it should be run in parallel, can be run in parallel, and the idea is it gives us time to transition people over to Q&A Evolve. Support for Q&A 10.1.5 we think will be at least 12 to 18 months, so it's not like it's an immediate thing you have to move to. And initially, for those of you on 10.1.5, currently it will support the SunSystems 6.2 extended analysis functionality. One other thing we think might be of interest to people, and this is something Infor is considering at the moment, they haven't determined if they will go ahead or not, but there is the possibility of a lighter weight budgeting and planning option in the future. So not so lighter weight, it's a lighter weight than having to use the BI module to do that work. So I thought I might show you now what Q&A looks like. So this and some of the dashboards. So this here is one of the dashboards that come up through Q&A. You can see it through the screen. So dashboards are going to be available to all customers who have data links, including the Sun4 customers. So that's all of you here. As you can see, it's now available in Excel. Just to flick through some other screens here. It looks quite familiar in terms of how you set your data up. You can see here's the selection list and what you want to output. So quite familiar for those of you who use it now. But here we can do some outputting differently, which is the dashboard. So we've got some reports here. You can see we've got an option to edit the table, which is that blow up of the screen there. Some of you will use Q&A Alert currently, and that's a separate module. That's also moving into the Excel plugin. For those of you who don't use it, it's basically a way of just scheduling your reports. You can see here in the corner and sort of the middle of the screen, bottom middle, I want to run this report at a certain time, and the blow up there showing you that I want to email it to these particular group of people. For those who use Vision Executive, again, this will look familiar. It's a drill path manager. That's actually moving into the Excel plugin. It's a dockable drill path, right-click shortcuts, basically referencing anything in Q&A Evolve, and it's a record and replay drill path, so you can basically rerun it over and over again. This is something that's maybe not familiar to many of you, and it's Q&A Context. And what Q&A Context is Q&A web part for Mingle. And again, I mentioned Mingle earlier. I'll let Phil talk about that to you a bit later on. But what it allows us to do is provide visualizations of data that come through Q&A as a web part in Mingle. So you might be doing, in this case, the example is a customer. You might be within a customer screen in SunSystems. You can have this information displayed in Mingle to give you some contextual information. It may be a report that you do. And then just to show you briefly, this is a Mingle screenshot, but there's that same report that we just saw before, actually rendered through SharePoint, through Mingle. So once you've created your dashboards, they can be emailed, and that email's through an embedded link, and that can be opened in a browser or mobile device. Currently that's on iOS devices, but the Android version is coming. And just to finally finish off there, Q&A Motion, and again Phil will talk a little bit more about Motion. But this is just to show you, here's those Q&A reports that we looked at a minute ago, or some of them coming up here on a mobile device, and they could be emailed to this mobile device. So I just want to finish off briefly talking about upgrades. So as I mentioned at the start, 6.1 is the version that is currently available. 6.2 is due for release by the end of this month, so we're waiting for that any time now. and the first release of Q&A Evolve is due in April. When we actually get 6.2, we're not going to release it immediately out because we want to put it through some testing rigors, and also we need to make sure that the companion modules that you have are compatible and tested with 6.2. The companion modules will be upgraded for Unicode for those who are interested in that module. So we're sort of thinking probably about June, July we'll be able to start releasing that version of SunSystems. So why would you upgrade? So Dean's mentioned that from the end of May, which is the coming up very fast, that Infor will no longer be able to buy Sun 5.4 licenses. They will continue to support Sun 5.4, as will PA. So we're not saying it's not supported. But there are lots of new functionality that we've just talked about. There's the Unicode, there's the extended analysis, you can web deploy. There's a number of reasons to do it. And so we think these are the compelling reasons to upgrade. Regarding web deployment, you can actually have a mix of environments. You could have your PC for the users who are in the office. You can deploy over the web. You can deploy using Mingle, and you've got mobile. The other thing with 6.2, which a lot of people find interesting, it's cloud ready, and it is a prerequisite if you want to actually run through the cloud. It also opens up the platform for collaborative capabilities, and which is what Phil's going to talk about next. And that includes workflow approvals. For example, you can have your journals approved, your payments approved, you can have a PO approval, account allocation approvals, and event monitoring. There's real-time notification and alerts of events within SunSystems. There's enhanced solutions through ION. So this is your integration tool, ION, and there's enhanced solutions. It also provides other functionality, ION. If you remember back, I mentioned ION in terms of enterprise data management. It's a tool that allows us to pass that information around. For some of you, you may need to know that SunSystems 6.2 is going through an audit right now with BDOs to confirm that it's IFRS compliant. They're expecting that anytime soon. 6.1 has already been audited and confirmed. Now, something I really wanted to point out for people is the upgrade path. You can only upgrade to SunSystems 6.2 from SunSystems 5.4 or 6.1 or 4.2 plus. So what that means for you who are on earlier versions is that we would have a two-step upgrade if you wanted to go to 6.2. Now, my final bit of information today, just to share briefly with you, is about your deployment options. So I talked before about touched on the cloud and ION and Mingle. Basically, there's a lot of ways you can do. You can distribute and use Sun, but a lot of them relate around using ION to do that. For the cloud offering that's coming, will be actually hosted in the Amazon cloud, and the reason they've done that is the Amazon pricing model is elastic. That is, you only pay for what you're using. That compares quite differently to hosted environments that many of you will use now. The benefit of Amazon is that the cloud's not necessarily based out in the Americas, which happens in a lot of situations. They're going to be hosted. It's going to be hosted in 6 locations around the world. I don't have details of where those locations are yet, but that's certainly what's going to be happening. It's going to be offered in 2 bundles, which will include some components of 10x. So if you're familiar with your licensing, you'll see the Cloud Foundation is very similar to what we call EXFM. And then you've got your Cloud Business. There'll be some modules of the 10x coming, which Phil's about to talk to you about, which can become available. But I just wanted to point that out to you and let you know that's coming. And at this point now, I'm going to pass the screen back over to Phil and just leave you with this screen here, just showing you that everything, it's all available on the very latest technologies. And over to you, Phil. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Jodie. This is Dean again. Just to clarify on the point that Jodie made, customers that are on earlier versions of version 5, such as 5.21, you actually can upgrade to version 6.2, but it's just a 2-fold process. You would actually need to go to 5.4.1 first, then to 6.2. So just clarifying that for you. If you are unclear, feel free to speak to your account managers. Next up, we're going to have Phil Taphouse, who's going to be covering off the Infor 10 collaboration framework and some exciting new products around that. For those of you that don't know Phil Taphouse, he's another PA veteran of 10 years. He's an accountant, ex-consultant, and now BDM, and I'll now hand over to Phil.
Hello everyone. As Dean said there, having been around Sun for a long time, I'd say this is one of the most interesting times with SunSystems. A couple of the points there that Jodie's brought up is the new version of Q&A Evolve, which combines Excel and Exec and alerts into one tool, and it's a long overdue, and that is going to make a massive difference, as well as the extended analysis, which I've been looking out for a long time, which enables us now to have analysis about analysis. So Infor really started to sharpen up their strategy now. They're beginning with the last couple of years to start to put the correct R&D in, focusing the products. So what we're going to talk about now is another one of their product strategies that they're using, which is called the Infor 10X framework. Now, Jodie's mentioned many times this ION, and that's what we're going. It's a technology, basically, which enables us and gives us a new interface over SunSystems. So this is not necessarily the next step for you to go to Infor 10X. But it allows you to see where the product is going. But it's not, in a strict sense, a product. It is really a framework. So it's not like a module of SunSystems. In fact, it doesn't have to have anything to do with SunSystems at all. It just sits over SunSystems in this case and gives us an interface which Jodie called Mingle. Now, Mingle is like SharePoint. It's those of you that are used to that. Now, SharePoint is a portal, and that means that it can have many different parts on the screen, or web parts, that interact with each other and synchronize. But the real advantage with a business application such as Sun is that we can interact anything we're doing within SunSystems web part with other objects on the screen. And then combined with this, we then have this ION layer, which allows us to interact with SunSystems, not as a typical business application, which we're used to going to menus, but it's a far more of an event-based and alert-based way of working. So what it's doing is bringing much more of your typical way that you use your iPhone and the web to a business application. And what it does, ION is a listener in a sense. It listens for events on SunSystems data, and so when a new transaction or code is created, it picks it up immediately in real time, puts it into something here called the business vault, which you see at the bottom there, and then allows us to track these transactions and to do all the nice things above it. So on the screen there, it consists of workflow, so it enables us to set up and enable workflows very simply. It's not a very technical task. So workflow would, in SunSystems terms, typically be used for any creating of any data, like a bank detail, a new account code, supplier, allows approvals, allows different people to interact at different points. It's a staged way of bringing in data, and really it allows you not to really have to run any audit reports anymore, because you are showing that you have actually every transaction, that every new object that's entity that's entered to Sun has had some approval. It's very much more event-based, and what it does, it brings, and which I'll show you in a second, the new interface, and it brings a far more. It means that you don't have to go looking for things. So if we go to the next slide. So in this case here, we call it the consumerisation of a business application, because we know business applications are quite hard to work with unless you've been trained. You need to know what to do, where to go, when to look. So this absolutely turns it on our head in the sense that everything that you're interested in, like if I'm interested in a supplier or a particular transaction or a person, I can subscribe to it within the interface, so that I then follow that transaction. And so if I subscribe to a supplier, a particular one, any invoice that comes up that's posted against it, I'll get alerted about. Now, I could just be alerted, or I might be given a task to do something. That's the workflow. So there's alerts, and events. So what happens, ION, this is this technology that, that Infor have been working on for the last couple of years. It listens to the SunSystems database, what's going on. It then captures these events into a kind of special warehouse, which is called the business vault. And then the user subscribes to what he or she is interested in. And it's this pushing, and rather than going to searching, which just completely changes things. So I'm now going to show you the interface. And this is the Mingle interface. So you can see the different parts on the screen. And on the left-hand side, we can see, what I'm following. So there's a debtor I'm following, or revenue account. I'm also following a person, or there's a sales order that you can see there, or a journal that may have been raised. So that means anything that happens against any of those entities will go into my feed, which is in the middle there, which if you're obviously familiar with Facebook, you'll know how the feeds work. So anything in the middle I can post, I can add a comment. So it means that as a social collaboration, we can collaborate on business transactions, and not just in a Facebook sense where you're just socially talking. You can have a supplier, it's linked to an account code or a particular item, and you can have a discussion around that particular item. So bringing this social with the application, it just makes the application so much more useful. And here it is in a little bit another view of it. And as you can see there, alerts again, where I've been pushed. And you can see a couple of escalations there. Because we've got the workflow, we can bring in, where there's an alert based on a particular time limit. If something hasn't been approved or something needs to be escalated quickly. In the middle, you can see the tasks. They can be approval of this supply, approval of this journal. So they're for me to do. And on the right, there's some posts which we've made around particular items in the business application. And down in the bottom, you can see some just out of the box widgets, which give us information about alerts, the status of them, whether they're escalated or not actioned, and also some trending ones on the bottom right, so that it shows us what, if a particular customer is having a lot of activity against it, we can actually see what's going on. So all of this is really called, for SunSystems, it's, I wouldn't say out of the box, but it's already been predefined to work against SunSystems. And it can be used against other applications, which I'll talk about a bit. So here's just another view there. And by the way, this can be, all these alerts like this one you're seeing now, can be rendered in an iPhone. So you really have these pushed to you in the most convenient way. Okay, so what you're seeing here is just an asset screen, an asset setup screen in SunSystems. This is in the Mingle interface. So what we're looking at here is the Sun application rendered through this interface, and on the top right and the bottom right, you can see two different widgets. I still can see my alerts at the top right, but on the bottom right there, you can see a query and analysis widget. So as I said earlier, what it means is that each of these parts of the screen will synchronize and interact with each other. So that as I put this asset in, this particular one, you can see that it's rendered in the Q&A widget, the transactions against that asset. And that's just an example there, where typically, we would, if we didn't have the Mingle interface, we would just have the SunSystems application on its own. And what we're looking at now is just a simple address screen in Sun. But on the right, you can see an example here of using web parts which come in from externally. So in this case, it's a Google, say, map web part. And what it's doing is interacting with the data in Sun. So when I'm bringing a particular address code, it interacts with the web part on the right, and it renders and synchronizes to update it with that. Now, you can think of many applications for that. For instance, in a currency setup screen, it could be linked to a currency rates web part. Because there's a lot of web service providers out there, and Dun & Bradstreet and all sorts, which you can link directly to that. But it's just showing you how it's in context. The web part updates in the context of what I'm looking at in SunSystems. And of course, another great example is the ABN website if I'm looking at a supplier. And here's just a screenshot of the workflow set up within ION. Now, the key part to this is that it's very configurable by an end user. And so these are very much drag and drop objects that you can put on the screen. And they can be configured to all sorts, quite complex ones, or just simple, I want to set up an approval for an account code. And it works with roles and groups, so you can very simply work it within the structure of the organization. And in the bottom left, it's got messages. And these are helpful messages, so as you're creating workflows, it makes sure that you're doing it right, that you're not putting in some connections which won't work, so that you can really get it up and going and working and tested and deployed, with no errors and quite simply. Okay, a couple of things now. This is my final slide on this. So we've looked at this ION, which allows us to track events and part and components and entities in our system. It brings it much more of an alert and event-based, rather than you're typically having to go down and look for things and run reports, for instance. But this would be a next step. But lots of you who use SunSystems will have other applications in your business, core applications which run health insurance ones or any type of application. Now the great thing here, whereas ION is ready to work with SunSystems out of the box, this same framework, because it's not connected to Sun, can be used over other systems. So you can have exactly the same style of interface, alerts and event-driven, social, with another business system. And you literally would go into the Mingle interface, and instead of displaying Sun, you can have a place where you go to Sun, and then you can click on another business application you have, still within the same screen, still getting the same style of working. And that's where the being connected to a big software provider like Infor, who can put a lot of R&D behind this, it then enables us to modernize other systems that we have, so that you don't necessarily have to rip them out. If they're not very easy to use, or they take specialist skills, it suddenly becomes a lot easier, especially for someone if they need to interact with more Sun and another system. And also, just on this, I did mention, or Jodie mentioned, I was going to talk about Motion, which is the mobile part of SunSystems. It's now fully mobile deployed, and you can actually go to the App Store, and you can actually go and find an app ready there for Infor. Obviously, it needs to be configured to work. You need the licenses and so on, but it makes that transition to mobile very simple. You can now very simply on a tablet access SunSystems, and in the same sort of Mingle interface, you can access your alerts and so on and approvals on a mobile phone. So really, we have brought in a much more consumer-driven interface and style to really what is just, dare I say, a boring business application, and making it far more usable and exciting to use, and a lot more beautiful in look and feel now. It's the way that Sun Infor have worked with a design house, the Soho that Jodie mentioned. It just makes the whole application look and feel and much more easier to work with. So that's finished there on the ION, the 10X framework. As I say, that's not necessarily a next step. You would perhaps want to get upgraded to 6.2 first, but then you do know at least what's available or what is coming and available to you, once you extend beyond that.
Okay, thank you, Phil. So I guess I'd like to just conclude with what we've covered today. In summary, I think we can all agree the future direction of Infor is an environment of greater collaboration where you can work anywhere, anytime within your business more intuitively. So it's very important now that you align your business's vision against this backdrop. because I think it's a direction that SharePoint and Infor are very much going. There are a lot of compelling reasons to upgrade, so I'll run you through these and just reiterate the roadmap pertaining to your specific versions. So as you can see from the slide, if you're on version 4, you've pretty much got 3 options. You can either stay within the 4 pathway, which is predominantly just for technical compliance, so you'll be going to the latest version being 4.4, or the next option is to make the jump up to version 6.1, which is current, where this will give you access to the 10x framework that Phil spoke of. Alternatively, from July, you'll be able to move to the new release version 6.2. For the version 5 customers, the only option for you now is to make the jump into the version 6 path. So your option is version 6.1 now, or again, alternately from July, version 6.2. So we've got a couple of different engagement setups for your next step. Either please contact your account manager, where your BDM and your account manager will do a strategic review with you to review your requirement and align the best options for you pertaining to that. The second option is called an optimization review. As we're all aware, for a lot of long-time Sun customers, with the busyness of day-to-day life, it's very easy for things to get stale. So the optimization review is a consulting exercise which is fully documented, providing recommendations. It's probably a 3 to 4 day exercise dependent on your specifics. But ultimately, this is a deep dive into your processes, your workflows and your regimes, and it's a much deeper way of driving value through your upgrade. So they're pretty much your 2 options, but your first step is to contact your account manager if we're not speaking to you already, just to look at your specific requirement and based on what you've heard today, how we frame the solution for you. So I'd like to thank you for your time today. If you do look on the right of your screens, you'll see a question box. If you could please email any questions you've got through in that box, and we'll endeavour to answer those questions for you. So I'll now open the floor to any questions and answers that you've got. If you could please shoot them through in the question box. Thank you.
Hi, I can see the questions. I'm putting some responses up and publishing to all. Can everybody see them? I think we can. So I've just answered 2 questions. One, does Sun 6.2 allow us to attach scanned invoices to documents? Yes, it does. Actually, you can do that in 6.1 also. There's actually it's got a special name. I don't see which name escapes me at the moment, but yes, you can attach documents to it. You can also use URLs through T codes to if you've got a document management system. Is Motion available without Ion? Phil, I've answered yes, but I think that might be a question for you. I think we don't need to license you for Ion to do that. Is that correct, Phil? We lost Phil. I think that's correct. As per the cost, we'll have to get the question. I think Heather, you sent was how much does it cost? I think that was in response to the question about Motion. I'll need to get back to you on that. Yeah, so so Nathan, yeah, so your question about upgrade path, yeah. So essentially we can only upgrade you to 5.4 from 5.1. Sorry, from 6.2 to, you can only go from 5.4 or 6.1 as I mentioned. So yes, you would have a 2-step upgrade path, but it's not like a double. One of the questions I had yesterday was that does it double the cost? The answer is no, unless you decide to stop in it at a particular version first. And it would depend, I guess the question on this is whether you want to use some of the functionality available in 6.2 or whether you'd be happy to go to 6.1. So if you just want to go to 6.1 and that functionality suits you, then that's a single step upgrade, but you would need to go from 5.3 to 6.1 and then 6.1 to 6.2 if you wanted to use some of that functionality in 6.2. Tracy asked a question about scanned invoices. Does it include attachment to purchase invoice entries? I'll get back to you on that one, Tracy, because they're in certain places, and I think there actually might be a modular price for it. So I'll come back to you on that question. I think it does let you do that, but I'll confirm that for you. Just on the question of whether you go 6.1 or 6.2, Infor will support 6.1 for a period of time now. We sort of think it's probably got at least a 2-year life cycle in terms before they stop patching it, but obviously, as you know, for those of you who've been on versions for a number of years, they don't stop the supporting of it, it just means it's not being improved, and we, of course, the PA, will continue to support you as well. But all that Phil talked to you about, motion, mingle, ion, that's all available at 6.1, just in case anybody's unclear on that one.
Okay, great. I'd just like to say thank you to everyone for coming and for Dean, Jodie and Phil for presenting. If you do have any other questions, please feel free to ask via email or call, and be in contact with the account managers. Okay, thank you so much everyone for coming. Bye.
Thanks, Andrew.